Story number 1. I'm obsessed with online gaming, specifically Grand Theft Auto 5, which came out a while ago, but I only started getting into it recently. I didn't care for the single-player story. I only liked online playing. Now, I should probably mention that I'm a girl. One of the reasons I love GTA 5 so much is because I don't really encounter a lot of people who actually care about the fact that I'm a girl. It doesn't matter. I've met one or two guys who ask crude questions or make sick jokes, but that's about it. I don't go around telling people that I'm a girl. However, my gamer name makes it pretty obvious that I am. I won't tell you what it is for obvious reasons. Let's just say it has the word princess in it. Anyway, back to the story. I've never met a creep that I can't handle, but one winter morning, I had the scariest experience of my life. It had snowed during the night, and with the right amount of snowfall covering the roads and black ice making commuting dangerous, school was canceled. Instead of rushing out to play in the snow, I hopped onto my console and started up my game. Most of the day went by without a hitch, until one guy on the server happened to notice that I was a girl. I think I had just stolen some of his business's product, which is something you can do in the game, and he was pretty upset. I can't even repeat the slurs and insults that flooded the chat. I've dealt with the same thing before. It wasn't long before the insults became actual threats. He started saying things like how he would kill me and my whole family. He said he would burn my house to the ground. The threats got more violent. I did my best to ignore the guy, and I probably should have just kept doing that. When he said he was going to burn my house to the ground, I got a little too confident. I responded, "How? You don't even know where I live." He went quiet after that, and I felt pretty good about myself for a full 5 seconds. After that, I saw something appear in the chat that scared the hell out of me. My skin turned pale and goosebumps covered my skin. The guy went quiet only for a moment, and when he came back, he typed my address into the chat. He knew where I lived. I'm still not sure how he found out what my address was. My fight or flight response kicked in and I shut off the console. Not only that, I pulled the plug completely. I contacted the game's support. I was told that the guy got banned and that was the end of it. Thankfully, no one ever showed up to the house and nothing came of that creep's threats. I still play GTA 5 online, but I rarely ever speak in the chat. You never know who you're talking to or what they're capable of. Story number 2. I usually don't like talking in online games. I'm kind of an introvert, and while I like playing online games with other people, I'm really shy and I very rarely actually talk to them. This is difficult because I play a lot of shooters which require you to communicate with your teammates. I still have game chat on though, so I can hear my teammates make callouts, but my microphone is on push to talk. That way, they can't hear me. I managed to get away with using the game's pinging system to communicate. My main game at the time of this story was Fortnite. I know what you're going to say. Not too long ago, I got loaded into a squad. 2 of the guys sounded around my age, which was mid-teens, but the third one sounded like a really young kid. He was really loud and obnoxious, but I found it kind of adorable. He seemed really impressed by my skill and was constantly complimenting me. I won't lie, I loved it. Anyway, we were doing pretty well, but we ultimately lost the game. Now, usually I just load into the next random squad. However, the kid sent me a friend request and I did really enjoy playing with him. So I accepted and went on to play several more games with him. He was very talkative and didn't really mind that I wasn't. It was the best time I'd had on the game in a while. About 6 games in, I heard a strange sound through his microphone. It was like a loud, sudden bang followed by the kid's gasp. Then there was silence. I had no idea what was happening, but his character in the game had stopped moving in the middle of nowhere, and he'd gone silent for the first time since we started playing. I was already worried that something bad had happened. I built around him in the game and just chilled for a bit, thinking that he'd just gone AFK for a bit. He did come back, but he sounded really different. He was crying and I could barely understand what he was saying. I knew that he was in trouble and he was asking for my help. This was the first time I'd ever thought about using my microphone, but I had no other choice. I started asking him questions and eventually learned that his dad was drunk, which sounded like a common occurrence, but he said his dad was really angry. It was so horrifying hearing this little kid explain in tears how terrified he was of his own father. I went on to tell the kid to lock his door and be really quiet. When I told him to call the cops, he said his mom told him he was too young for a phone. I was playing on European servers and he sounded British. I happened to live in Russia at the time. I asked him to tell me his address while I dialed the British police myself. I kept talking to him, comforting him, while explaining the situation to the police. It was the most terrifying experience I'd ever been through, so I can't even imagine how that poor little kid was feeling. I'll cut the story short. The police did get to his house in time. The kid didn't come online for a while after that, and I was a little worried. One day, I saw him online and instantly loaded into the game. It was such a relief to hear that he was okay and that he and his mom were living in a new house far away from his father. We still play Fortnite every now and again. Even as we both move on to other games and life gets busy, we still manage to log on and enjoy a few games together. He's the only person that I talk to in online games, and I'm really grateful to have him in my life. Story number 3. I've been into gaming since I was a little kid. It started as early as Mario on the Nintendo. Once I got older, it wasn't long until I got into PC gaming and Steam. Back then, there weren't a lot of high-end games like there is today. Still, my computer could barely run games like Half-Life, and there was no hope in me being able to play something like Crysis. Due to this, my main games were Team Fortress 2 and almost all the Quakes. Now, Quake was cool, but there's something different about playing an online game. I don't think the online version of Quake was out yet, or I just didn't care about it, so I mostly played TF2 for that social interaction. TF2 isn't exactly known for its community. There are a lot of jerks, weirdos, and creeps playing that game. Basically, ignoring the in-game chat box was the easiest way to actually enjoy the game. This one match I played is burned into my mind, and I haven't touched the game since. We had a pretty good heavy on our team, so I was playing medic to keep him alive and boost his damage. I basically thought this was the best way to win the game. Some guy was playing pyro, and he would get pretty upset with me whenever he died. Now, I don't know how much you might know about the game, but medic is basically the only character that can heal other people on the team. There are health packs scattered around the map, and you can always go back to base to heal. I was focusing on healing the heavy, but I wasn't neglecting the other players. The pyro kept rushing forward into the entire enemy team and was expecting me to follow and keep him alive, which I obviously wasn't going to do. It made me angry whenever he blamed me for his death or insulted my skill at the game. I did my best to ignore him and play the game. We ended up winning and I felt good about it. Unfortunately, the story doesn't end there. When I logged off, I noticed I had a friend request on Steam. It was the same pyro that was insulting me in-game. Now, I usually don't do this, but I was curious as to what he was going to say, so I accepted. At first, he did exactly what I expected. The chat box was instantly filled with all kinds of insults and threats. I wasn't bothered, but I didn't know what was happening in the background. I knew about viruses and that, but I always thought you had to click a link or something for that to happen. Turns out, all I had to do was accept his friend request. I went to close the chat, but my mouse wasn't working. Then the cursor started moving all by itself. I watched in disbelief as the cursor on the screen opened the browser and someone started typing something in. I didn't touch my keyboard or my mouse. The pyro had taken control of my computer somehow. Obviously, I didn't let it go any further than that. I turned off my computer by holding the power button in, and that was it. I didn't get to see what the guy was going to search with my browser, and I'm really not interested. My curiosity has limits. That incident kind of put me off TF2 completely. I still play other games, but I've never gone back to that one. Story number 4. For mine and my sister's safety, I won't be giving too many details in this story. I won't tell you the game I was playing or the gamer tag of the creep that might have ruined online gaming for me completely. At the time, we were sharing an apartment because neither of us could afford to live alone, and we were both too prideful to go back to living with our parents. We got along well, so it worked for us. When it came to gaming, we had completely different tastes, but there was this one online game that we both enjoyed. I don't want to risk giving away too much about the game, but I will say that you could eat food for health. We were in a squad with 2 other people we didn't know. One of them was pretty chatty, but the second guy didn't really say anything. After a while, my sister started joking about how the food in the game looked so good that it was making her hungry. She went on to say how she was craving pizza. That was normal for her since she loved pizza. I agreed, and the other guy had a laugh about it. The 4th guy stayed quiet. Later into the night, we were still playing with the same squad. Then, in the middle of the match, we heard the doorbell ringing. We weren't expecting anyone, so we ignored it. I guess the guy heard the doorbell over the microphone because, after being silent the whole night, he suddenly spoke up. All he said was, "Aren't you going to answer that?" My sister and I shared a look, but we didn't really have a reason to suspect the guy of anything. Boy, were we wrong. I did answer the door, and you won't believe me, but it was a delivery guy with a pizza. I argued with him for a few minutes about how we didn't order anything and that I wasn't going to pay for it, but he insisted that it was paid for already. I did what any reasonable person would do and took the pizza. My sister didn't complain. We carried on playing while we ate, and that's when the silent guy spoke up again. This time, when we heard his voice, it sent shivers up and down our spines. He said, "How's the pizza?" We had turned off our microphones so they didn't have to hear us eating. I know he heard the doorbell ring, but he couldn't have possibly known that it was a pizza delivery guy at the door. Obviously, we both freaked out. After a short debate, we both left the game without saying anything. We didn't even finish the pizza. I felt sick to my stomach that whole night, and I even thought about calling the police, but what would they have done? We were on edge for a whole month after that, double-checking that the doors were locked and looking over our shoulders. There's no doubt in my mind that the silent guy had sent a pizza to our house. I don't know why, and I don't know how he knew where we lived. It's the not knowing that scares me the most. Story number 5. Escape from Tarkov isn't really a new game, but it's not old either. It's really expensive, which also makes it kind of exclusive. I guess that was initially why I was attracted to the game. There are a lot of gamers out there, so I wanted to feel special. After I bought the game, it was a hard ride. The game is extremely difficult, to the point of losing everything you have when your character dies and having to start the next game with nothing. The worst part is that it's online, so you could lose one game and load into the next with nothing, but someone else has a lot of really good gear. Anyway, I was determined to get good at it, and I eventually did. I was winning more than I was losing. I became one of those players with really good gear against people with nothing. The game became really rewarding for some time, and I never had any problems. I guess that's why what happened to me is still so frightening to this day. I got home after a long day at work, and I just wanted to play for a bit before heading to bed. I've never experienced hackers in the game or anything until that night. While I was playing, my game started glitching. My screen flickered, the sound cut out, my character started doing things all by itself. They were jumping up and down, spinning around in circles, and then firing up into the air until there was no more ammo in the gun. Now, at first, I was worried because I'd gotten so much gear, and if someone heard the gunshots and killed me, I would lose all of it. I couldn't Alt F4 the game either. I just sat there and stared as the game went crazy. Then, something even weirder happened. The game doesn't have an in-game chat box, but one popped up at the bottom of my screen. This is when I started shaking. The chat box filled in seconds with the same word written over and over again. die, 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 all in capital letters. It filled my screen in seconds and didn't stop. I couldn't understand it, and it was starting to freak me out. I didn't care about my gear in the game anymore. I held in Alt F4 to shut down the game. That didn't work. Then my character just died. Just like that. No one shot me. Nothing in the game happened that would cause my character to die, but they did. Then one final message popped into the game chat, and it still sends shivers down my spine when I think about it. The last message was, "You're next." The screen went blank, and my computer shut down after that. That happened a few months ago, and I still haven't opened the game since. I don't know what to do. I'm so scared. Story number 6. This happened during my senior year of high school. My friend Liz invited me and 2 other girls to spend the weekend at her family's cabin. It was about an hour away from our town, nestled right next to a quiet lake and surrounded by a thick forest. The plan was simple: relax, take tons of pictures, and go paddleboarding. There was just one problem. No adults were coming with us. I knew my parents wouldn't approve, so I told them Liz's parents would be there. It wasn't something I was proud of, but with college right around the corner, I figured I wouldn't get many more chances like this to just enjoy time with my friends. We packed up and headed out the next morning. The drive was easy, and when we got there, we were all blown away by how gorgeous the cabin was. It was big enough that we each got our own room, and there was even a hot tub on the back deck. That first night was perfect. Just music, laughter, and warm summer air. The next morning, I woke up before the others. I decided to get up and go outside with my camera. I loved photography, and the lake looked especially beautiful with the sun glinting off it. That's when I saw it. A yellow hummingbird, bright, fast, and darting from flower to flower. I followed it into the woods, trying to snap the perfect photo. It kept flying further and further, just out of reach, until finally it settled on a tree. I got the shot and looked down to admire the image. That's when I realized I had no idea where I was. The trees around me were thick, and the path I had taken, if you could even call it that, was gone. I turned in a slow circle and realized I hadn't left any markers or signs behind. No trail, no tracks, nothing. I pulled out my phone to use the compass app, but it had no signal. No GPS, no bars, nothing. I lifted the phone into the air, trying to catch even the weakest signal, but it was useless. That's when the first wave of anxiety hit me. Still, I told myself to stay calm. I could just retrace my steps, right? I tried, I really did, but every turn looked the same, and after almost half an hour of wandering, I realized I was completely and utterly lost. I had no food, no water, and nobody even knew I had gone into the woods. I kept moving, this time marking the ground with sticks every so often so I wouldn't double back. The sun climbed higher in the sky, and the heat started to wear me down. My legs were aching, and my lips were dry. Still, no clue where I was. At one point, I tried to climb a tree to get a better view. I made it up a few feet before slipping and slamming into the ground. It knocked the air out of me, and I just lay there, dazed, wondering how the day had gone so wrong so quickly. As night approached, the panic started to set in for real. Everything became darker, quieter, and colder. My phone's flashlight was the only thing keeping me from walking straight into trees. But the battery was draining fast. And that's when I saw it. A clearing. At the center was a shack, crudely built with logs and stones. Smoke was curling from the chimney. My heart jumped. Someone was inside. I don't usually walk up to strange houses in the woods, but I didn't feel like I had much of a choice. I knocked on the door. No answer. I waited, then knocked again. Still nothing. I called out, "Hello, is anyone home? I'm lost. I need help." Still silence. I jiggled the doorknob. It wasn't locked. The door creaked open, and I hesitated, but then I stepped inside. The place was tiny. A table, a few chairs, some old blankets. The smell hit me immediately. It was thick and sour, like rotting meat. There were candles burning low on the shelves, and a bucket of water in the corner. My skin crawled. And then I heard footsteps behind me. I spun around, and there he was. A man, or at least something that looked like one. He was tall, like unnaturally tall. His body was almost completely covered in hair, and the only thing he wore was a filthy rag around his waist. He held a wooden bat in one hand. Nails were sticking out of it. He didn't say a word. He just stared. And then he moved. I screamed, loud. I ran past him, out the door, crashing into branches, stumbling over roots. I didn't even think to use my flashlight. I just ran. I was cut up all over, thorns torn to my legs, my elbows were bleeding, my lungs burned, but I didn't stop running until I couldn't move anymore. I collapsed on the ground, gasping for air, sobbing, and praying I'd wake up and find this was all a dream. But then, I heard something. It was faint at first, a thumping sound overhead. I looked up and saw a search helicopter cutting across the sky. I jumped up, waving my arms like a maniac, screaming until my throat hurt. They saw me. A medic was lowered down, and within minutes, I was in the chopper. I couldn't stop crying. Relief, fear, exhaustion, it all hit me at once. At the hospital, they treated my injuries. Nothing too serious. Liz and the others started looking for me after an hour. When they couldn't find me, they called for help. My parents were so relieved they didn't even get mad about the lie. To this day, I still wonder what would have happened if I'd gotten there a few minutes later. If the man in the shack had locked that door. If the helicopter hadn't flown by when it did. I haven't been back to the woods since, and I never will. Story number 7. Shortly after I graduated from fashion school, I landed an interview with a high-profile design firm in New York City. It was my dream job, exactly the kind of opportunity I'd worked years for, and I was determined to make the best impression possible. I woke up hours earlier than I needed to that morning. I curled my hair, did my makeup perfectly, and packed out an outfit that looked sharp but still creative. I was nervous, but excited. The interview was on the 3rd floor of a towering skyscraper in Midtown, one of those buildings you can spot from almost anywhere in the city. To make sure I wasn't late, I called a cab and left with plenty of time to spare. The drive was smooth, no traffic at all. When I arrived, I had nearly 45 minutes before my appointment. The lobby was sleek, polished floors so shiny you could see a reflection in them, and people in tailored suits moving like they had somewhere important to be. I grabbed a coffee from the cafe in the building and imagined what it would be like to walk into that lobby every day for work. It felt like my life was finally falling into place. With 10 minutes to go, I tossed my empty cup and headed to the elevators. My heels echoed across the tile as I walked, and I remember feeling so confident, so ready. When I stepped into the elevator, there was only one other person inside. He looked like he belonged there. Maybe early 50s, sharp black suit, slicked back silver hair, expensive watch. He barely looked up from his phone as I stepped in. Still, I offered a polite, "Good morning." He didn't respond. I brushed it off. Maybe he wasn't a morning person. I pressed the button for the 33rd floor. He had already selected 72. The elevator doors closed and we began to ascend. Everything seemed normal until it didn't. At floor 19, the lights flickered. There was a loud jolt and the elevator came to a screeching stop. The man cursed quietly under his breath and went straight to the control panel, smashing the emergency button several times. Nothing happened. He hit it again, harder. I checked my watch. I still had 7 minutes before my interview, but my heart was sinking fast. This couldn't be happening. Not today. The man finally leaned in and spoke into the emergency mic, snapping, "We're stuck in this piece of junk. What's taking so long?" A calm voice replied, saying technicians were on the way, but that did little to calm him. "This is ridiculous. These people shouldn't even be allowed to work in maintenance," he yelled, pacing the small metal box like a caged animal. I backed into the corner. He was clearly growing agitated, and something about him, his voice, his body language, was making me nervous. I pulled out my phone to call someone, maybe the fire department or the front desk, but I had no service. None at all. Just a blank signal bar. "Do you have service?" he asked sharply. I shook my head. "No." More cursing, more pacing. Time passed painfully slowly. After about an hour, I was officially late for my interview. The man still hadn't calmed down. He mumbled under his breath about being late for something important, then slammed his fist into the wall. I sat down on the floor, trying to make myself small. My stomach started growling. I reached into my purse and found a granola bar I'd forgotten about. I broke it in half and offered him a piece. It was the first time he actually looked me in the face. He stared for a second, then shook his head. "No, I'm good." That was the only normal moment we had in that elevator. A little while later, he hit the emergency button again. The operator came on the mic, but still had no update. That sent him into a frenzy. He kicked the doors and shouted so loud it echoed off the metal walls. Then, something happened that changed everything. He took off his jacket, frustrated and sweating. As he did, something fell from his pocket and clattered onto the floor. A gun. It was small, black, but unmistakable. He saw me see it. For a moment, we just stared at each other. I forced my face to stay neutral. I didn't gasp. I didn't flinch. I acted like I hadn't seen anything at all. He picked it up, slipped it back in his jacket, and watched me for another second before turning his back to me. My heart was pounding. I was trapped in a steel box with a stranger and a firearm, and no one knew. The afternoon dragged on. 7 hours passed. The man started kicking the doors again, harder than before. Then he pulled out a crowbar from his briefcase. Who carries a crowbar? And tried to pry the doors open. It didn't work. I sat in silence, pretending to scroll my phone while holding it as high as possible, praying for a signal. Finally, after what felt like forever, I got one bar. I opened the messaging app. No time to call, just text. I sent a message to the front desk. "Stuck in elevator with man. He's armed and acting erratic. Please send help. Urgent." Message sent. It was the only thing keeping me calm. Then, at hour 8, the elevator jolted. The lights flickered again, and the doors slowly slid open. I was never so relieved in my life. Waiting outside were police officers, security staff, and mechanics. As I stepped out, I watched the officers move in. "Sir, step out of the elevator." He resisted, cursed, but they handcuffed him right there in the lobby. I later found out the truth. The man's wife worked in that building, on the 72nd floor. She had filed for divorce the week before. He had come to confront her, and according to the officers, he wasn't planning to leave quietly. They believe I saved lives that day by sending that message. Sometimes I still think about what could have happened if the elevator hadn't stopped. If he had reached her floor. Or worse, if he had turned on me first. I haven't stepped into an elevator since.